Now I know why you clicked on this video, and judging by the title, you probably might not like what I have to say. But hear me out first. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, about how nostalgia affects and influences our presence of the past and the present. Like, why do we remember so much about our gaming experiences during our formative years, and why games nowadays just can't recreate that same feeling, especially for me. This is especially a problem with me when I constantly compare current games to older games that I grew up playing. If you don't know by now, I was a fan of Assassin's Creed, and I grew up playing those games. I look back fondly on the days of the Ezio trilogy, AC1, and even AC3 to some extent. Yet why can't I feel the same about the newer games? Why do I constantly compare them to those games and criticize them? Like seriously, I admit, I criticize the newer games a lot more than I should for both right and the wrong reasons. It's just that I don't really understand why I have such a deep attachment to the older games. Is it the music, the setting, the endearing story and characters? And for some reason, I don't think it's just these things. I think the real answer goes deeper than that. I think the main reason why we remember so much about video games that we used to play during our childhood is that we were still growing and finding out about the world. A lot of things just felt new and exciting to us. That's why things like your first kiss still stand out to you, as you were experiencing all these different emotions for the first time. This is because of a phenomenon called neuroplasticity, which is the ability of our brain to adapt and change over time by creating new neural networks. This is especially at its highest during our childhood and adolescence. So feeling like the pure joy and ecstasy after clearing out a very difficult level or a boss in a video game is deeply etched onto your memory. Which is why just listening to the music of the Ezio games can really evoke such a strong emotional response out of me every time I hear it. Same can be said about minor details like the main menu screen, or just the feeling you get when booting up the game for the very first time. Games are also designed to engage your brain's reward pathways. So every time you defeated a tough boss in Dark Souls, dopamine was released, and when you revisit the same game years later, those same reward pathways are rewarded, which recreates the same feeling of joy and achievement. Another reason why games used to hit different when you were growing up back then was that gaming was also seen as a social experience with your friends, such as when you were playing online games such as Call of Duty or Halo every day after coming home from school. You had all the time in the world to master the game with your friends by discussing different strategies on how to complete a certain level or objective, which really helped you bond with them more, and you still treasure those bonds deeply. Those games you played growing up also provided you with a sense of comfort and safety, as it is in a way coming back home to something more familiar. This is exactly what I feel every time I revisit the older AC games. Hell, I even remember the control scheme of those games by memory. This is just because times were simpler back then, as you were a kid devoid of any adult stress or responsibility. Hell, your only stress around that time might have been to unlock all the achievements and completely 100%ing a game. We also can have a deeper attachment to older games as they might be tied to certain phases in our life, like starting high school for the first time or going through your first breakup. Like I said with Assassin's Creed, I can't believe I'm using the same example the third time, but we'll just run with it. I got into the franchise around 2012, which I know doesn't feel like that long ago, but it has already been over 13 years. Like that's wild to me. Like what the hell? Where did all the time go? But I remember that AC3 is the game that really got me into the franchise, and I started to play and follow all these games over that phase in my life. And I also made a YouTube channel around late 2015 where I started to cover AC content and leaks, which definitely sparked the inner YouTuber inside me. So in a way, yes, without AC, this channel wouldn't even exist, which is a crazy thing to say. So as you can see, there are a lot of factors that make those gaming experiences so memorable to us. But now the real question is, why can't we feel the same things anymore? And there are a lot of reasons as to why. First and most obviously, times were much simpler back then, as I said, with no worry or stress or responsibility in our lives. So we could just completely switch off and play games non-stop for hours without facing any real consequences. At best, your parents would ground you for a week, but I wouldn't really count that as a real consequence. It's just parents being annoying. However, you can't really do all these things as a functioning adult in society, especially in this economy. Another reason why modern games don't give us that feeling anymore is due to how overwhelming and big they can feel. Like seriously, games nowadays have really long ass tutorials and lots of gameplay mechanics for the player to learn and remember, which can be a lot to take in, especially for a new player. Also, the literal average length single player games take to beat nowadays is at least 30 to 40 hours, and it could go up to 60 hours at the minimum for RPGs, and no sane adult has the time and patience to do that. Except me, since I played the whole of Persona 5 Royal, which took me over 140 hours. But that was during COVID, so that could be the reason as to why I was able to do that. Or maybe I was just an addict and I really needed some help. In contrast, games back then were simple to get into and at best for over 10 to 15 hours. I also feel that with the rise of digital game downloads, we feel less of a physical connection with games. Back then you had to go all the way to the store to buy the latest game, and if it was especially a popular game like GTA, you could be waiting in line for hours. Yet the experience of waiting and finally having the physical game disc in your hands really created a strong emotional investment in that thing. We also have just changed so much as people over the last few years, and as adults have clearly seen more of the world and how it really is, which I think really has sort of numbed the process of discovery and excitement for us, which is why it can be really hard to invest yourself in a video game nowadays. We can of course also argue that the modern video game industry isn't really putting out that many quality games anymore, that gaming is dead, blah blah blah. We definitely look at games more critically nowadays, especially with the rise of social media platforms like YouTube. Everybody's a critic, including the likes of me. Like, we can just express our frustrations with the game by making an entire video on it, like I do of course. Yet why can't we bring ourselves to do the same for older games? Why do we look at older games with such rose-tinted glasses? Because certainly, if any new player were to get into those games now, they would find a lot of flaws with them. This is certainly true in my case, as I've been playing the original Resident Evil 4 for the first time recently, and I can certainly say that a lot of elements of that game haven't aged well. But that doesn't mean I don't enjoy the game, but it's certainly not a flawless masterpiece that everyone makes it out to be. Which is why I also admit that as much as I like the older AC games, they do have a lot of flaws, which a lot of the older fans of the franchise just like to dismiss as nostalgia is a hell of a drug that filters out all the negative experiences you had with the game, whilst really highlighting the good parts about the game. I see the same complaints about remakes of other games being criticized by the older fans, and again, I've been on both fences of the argument. Like, I love Silent Hill 2, as much as the remake is a good game as well, I can't help but admit that I'm clearly biased towards the original and I'm definitely obsessed over a lot of the minor details that weren't on the remake, even though it doesn't really matter that much to the casual player. However, I really love the Resident Evil remakes, and I cannot see myself playing the original version of the first couple games, as they are way too dated with its tank controls. I also really liked Persona 3 Reload, yet it was disliked by most of the fans of the original again for the same reasons I mentioned. Which is why this strong feeling of nostalgia really does prevent us from enjoying the things the same way that we used to, as it isn't really the game that we fell in love with, it's the feelings that we felt with them back then and who we were as a person. So how can we address this issue? Unfortunately, I don't really have a definitive answer for that. It is really hard to recreate the same feeling that you felt as a child. Yet there are ways you can hack your brain to enjoy games like you used to. First, and the most obvious one being, stop comparing newer games to the older ones. Comparison is a thief of joy, and it really is true. Now this is easier said than done, as you already have a pre-established standard of what you want the game to be like, which could definitely be hard to break. And I know it's certainly hard for me. But going into games as blind as possible, in my opinion, is the best way to ensure that you surprise with new things to find and discover. So don't look up game trailers or any information about the game prior to release. This keeps you completely in the dark as to what to expect, just like the very first game that you played in childhood, which recreates the same feeling of joy, discovery and excitement that was stored in your brain as a child. Secondly, you can also try creating an environment that reminds you of your childhood gaming setup. You know, with the old CRT TVs and possibly a rented or older console that you had like a PS1 or PS2 to really mimic that same early 2000s aesthetic. And you can also try playing games with retro inspired visuals like the 2D 8-bit games from the 90s. There's clearly a ton of those, especially on the indie side of games, as those games were also designed to give tribute to those older classic style games. You also have like PS1 remakes nowadays of already existing games, which again takes you back to those times. Also, lastly, I would like to say, just chill out and enjoy yourself. Yeah, sure, you have bills to pay and a job, but that doesn't mean you can't switch off and just enjoy life even for a bit. So try your best to switch the adult part of your brain off when you're gaming, and completely escape into the world of childlike wonder. But do make sure to game responsibly though, as you wouldn't want to mess up your sleep schedule. Nostalgia is a complex feeling to express in words. It's probably one of the strongest feelings you've ever felt as humans, and it is really hard to recreate the childhood nostalgia of discovering and playing games. Yet in a way, it's beautiful, as you will always cherish those memories. And who's to say that you cannot create new memories to look back upon? Of course you can. It takes a little effort now with so much access to pretty much everything, yet you can still find joy in the smallest things, not just in video games, but life in general. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did. This was a fun video project to work on, as it was just in the back of my head as an idea for quite some time. And I'm sorry it took this long for me to upload. I was busy with general life things that I need to sort out. But let me know in the comments below that what were your earliest memories with video games and how do you look at that time now. It would be interesting to hear your stories. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great day and I'll see you very soon with more videos in the future. See ya guys.